I've ever listened to where I legitimately was almost brought to tears, or maybe even brought to tears. But you know, when you listen to endless podcasts, the Apnea stories, and you hear some of the stories of the patients and the people that she interviews, there's one in particular that I'll send everybody to. It's a former military person who was a truck driver who starts crying while he's talking to her because he's telling about his journey to try to get parents to CPAP and the challenges that he faced. So that was a pretty tough episode to listen to, and was, you know, sort of tugs at your heartstrings. But we have a great, again, we have an all-star lineup today, and lots of energy right after lunch. We always want to schedule the person who's going to bring the heat. So literally, we sort of need that right now. So please welcome Emma Cooksey with Sleep Apnea Stories Podcast.
I was like, close to that, and then I'm like, oh gosh. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, awesome. So yeah, so I'm a patient, and it never sort of goes unnoticed when people invite me to speak at a professional conference like this, because I think so often patient voices are just missing in a lot of the discussion, especially around sleep apnea, but all sleep disorders. So yeah, so I'm Cooksey. I am a podcast host and a speaker and writer, but mainly I'm a patient advocate. So this is a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So to begin with, I'm going to share with you my journey to diagnosis with obstructive sleep apnea. And then I'll talk a little bit about starting my podcast, Sleep Apnea Stories. And then, I don't know if we have. I don't think that this is the right version of my presentation. Okay, we'll make it work. So yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some other things that I try to help with my sleep apnea, and then we'll talk a lot about. So over the last 3 years, I've just learned so much about sleep medicine that I just really started thinking more about ways that sleep techs can really be involved with helping and raising awareness about sleep apnea. So it's okay to laugh. So this is me and my brother. So I like to start here just because I think this is not the right version. I maybe like it's on my laptop. Would it be really bad to switch over? Because this has like Philadelphia Street Conference, it's not off the thing. I don't know. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Hey.
Sorry. So one thing I did want to know from all of you is I know that sleep apnea is really common. So I did wonder how many of you have a diagnosis of obstructive sleep apnea in the room? And keep your hands up if you're CPAP users. Okay, interesting, very interesting.
And come back to this 1 second. Zoom. Just go to share. Let's see.
Perfect.
Is
Thank
this
you
the right
so much.
Oh, wait a minute. We're gonna do this one. That's the one.
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
That's
What a
as
rock
fast
star.
as that could have happened.
What a rock star. Amazing. So yeah, so what I'm actually gonna talk about today, my own journey, all the things, and then just changes that I see happening in sleep medicine and how that can affect sleep tech. So this slide is just to explain that originally I'm from Scotland. And so that line is a weird accent. And so I feel like my brother's on it, like kind of tells a story about, being from Scotland. And so that's not where my obstructive sleep apnea symptoms started though. So for that, we skip forward to me graduating from university, and I studied law. And so I finished that when I was in my early 20s. And while a lot of my classmates went on to do postgraduate studies and got traineeships with big law firms, I didn't want to do that. So I went traveling for a year. So me and my friend Julie set off with our backpacks, and we went to Southeast Asia, and stayed in the most horrible backpackery places. I had a really great time. And so we landed in Sydney, Australia in December 1999. So that kind of ages me a lot. And I quickly set about trying to find a job because I didn't actually have a ticket home. So I told my mom that I actually lost, so I needed to make some money. So I got a job working in a huge commercial litigation department in a big law firm in downtown Sydney. So I actually worked in that white building. So this is the first time in my life. I definitely have times in my life where I thought, wow, I really sleep a lot. I'm really tired a lot of the time. But I think up until that point, I had never had a corporate job. I never had a schedule where I had to be at a desk from 9 till 5, or more often 8 till 6 in that particular job. And I really struggled, like even for the first couple of weeks. And before then, I'd been a student and I'd worked like waitressing jobs and had like 4 or 5 hour shifts, and I did fine with that because I could sleep either side. But this was the first time that I was struggling. So I went to work every day. I just remember after lunch, like just trying to keep my eyes open and having a really tough time. Plus all the work I was doing was super dull, so that makes it much more difficult to stay awake. So the main incident that kind of like the memory that sticks out for me was one morning. I was getting ready to go back to this job. And I've been there for like maybe 4 months or something. I had a couple more months to go. And if any of you have never been backpacking, it's not really that glamorous. So there was about 8 of us crammed into a house that was built for about a small family, and we had 1 bathroom. So all of the backpackers are sleeping on mattresses on the floor, and So we had 1 bathroom, and I was in the shower first thing in the morning. And my friend Marie came in to brush her teeth, and she was talking to me through the shower curtain. And I was just bawling, like tears running down my face, just like, and she was like, what is wrong? Like, why are you crying? And I said, I'm so tired, no matter how early I go to bed, I feel exhausted in the morning. I find it really, really hard to stay awake at work. And I have morning headaches every day. I basically had all of the symptoms of sleep apnea at that point, right? I had never heard of sleep apnea. So this was the first time she said to me, and I'll never forget it, she said, that doesn't seem normal to me. Have you been to a doctor? Like, that doesn't seem like a normal way to be. So that was kind of like the turning point for me, where I started thinking of it as it could be a medical problem. And up until that point, I think it just kind of thought I was like weak or there was something wrong with me. So I did think to myself, when I get back to Scotland, I'm going to go see a doctor. So you can tell by the title of this slide that the visit to the doctor did not go well. So the first doctor that I saw did a lot of blood tests and said, great news, we didn't find anything wrong with you. You seem fine. Maybe you're a bit stressed. And sent me home. So I went for years, really, living this kind of like double life where outwardly I was able to, work during the day, and I met my husband, he's there on the right side, had all my friends, went on trips, and did all these things. But the other part of it that I think people didn't really ever see was the fact that I was really struggling with sleepiness all the time. So the picture on the left-hand side is of a trip me and my husband took to Egypt, to the Sinai Peninsula. So he's really big into scuba diving. And we go out on this dive boat, and half the people are going to be diving, so they're strapping on oxygen tanks and getting ready to do that. All the rest of the other people are getting ready to swim and snorkel, so they're getting their snorkeling equipment ready, and I'm just trying to find somewhere that I can lay down and sleep the whole afternoon. So you can see me there snoring with my mouth open, and just not experiencing any of the things that there was to experience there. So I can say that I visited that place, but I didn't really, fully feel like I got the experience everybody else did. And so it wasn't all gloomy. I met my husband, who is from Florida, which is how I ended up in Florida. So lots of Americans in kilts at our wedding. It was the whole thing. And so we moved to Florida, and I was about 30, and I got pregnant right when we got off the plane, pretty much. So that first year, I had our first child, and the more and more pregnant I got, the worse and worse I felt. And the less I felt well rested in the morning. Like I already wasn't feeling it, right? But the more pregnant I got, the more it impacted my life to the point where I couldn't have worked. Like I was basically waking up and then thinking about when to take my first nap because I was so exhausted. So I went to the OBGYN a lot, and so I knew that they probably didn't know much about sleep or these kind of problems I was having. So I took the time to make an appointment with a primary care physician. And so I know now that primary care physicians aren't really trained in sleep as much, but I didn't know that then. So I showed up and I said, I know you're going to tell me that I'm pregnant, and that's why I'm tired. But that's not what it is. I've been feeling this tired for the last 10 years. And I've just never been able to figure out why. And so I talked about that I had morning headaches, that I was waking up a lot at night, and I was sleeping definitely enough hours at night, but I still was exhausted. And she just said, I know, but you're pregnant. So I went home, and by this stage I really thought there's something wrong with my sleep. And I even kind of said to her, is there someone that knows about sleep I could go and talk to? And she just said, well, no, I mean, you really don't fit any criteria for that. So I think it's just that you're pregnant. So then I had my first daughter, Cooksey, that's 18. And it was about, I didn't realize how lucky I was with this child. Like, it's funny listening to Dr. Afolabi Brian earlier, because with my first child, she just slept whenever I thought it was a good idea. So I'd be like, it's nap time, and she'd be like, okay, and take a nap. So I didn't realize I was lucky, but at 6 or 7 months, this child was just sleeping at night, 6, 7, 8 hours stretch. So I was having all this opportunity to sleep. But again, I just never felt well rested. I felt terrible. So I went back to the same doctor and I said, you said, I felt worse than pregnant. Here I am, not pregnant anymore, still really tired. What can you do about it? And she just kind of said, oh, but you're a new mom. And then a couple of things that she said stuck with me. So first of all, she said, sleep disorders are really rare, which everybody in this room knows is not true. And she also said, a lot of the symptoms did sound like sleep apnea, but she said, we don't really see sleep apnea in people like you. We're more looking for like older, overweight men. And I even said, like, you don't think we could do a test for that? And she was just like, no, you don't really have enough risk factors for that, so I don't think we're going to do that. So I go home, and at that point, I think I kind of like just felt so frustrated that she wasn't listening to me that I like had a good cry on the way home. So then, 3 weeks after that appointment, I was in the car with my baby strapped into her car seat in the back, and we were driving home across. Has anyone been to Jacksonville, Florida? So there's a big bridge called the Buckman Bridge that goes over the St. John's River. So it's quite near our house. So I was driving back across this bridge, and it's really a long bridge, and there's no stopping once you're on that bridge, you're on it. And so I got on there, and I just thought, I'm going to fall asleep, like the moment that I got on that bridge. And I did all the things that drivers do, where you blow air in your face, and I'm singing and just trying to think of anything to stay awake. And I was fixing my gaze on the big white truck in front of me and trying to make sure I kept enough distance between me and the license plate of that truck. And so the next moment, that license plate is coming right towards me really close in slow motion. And I had to slam on my brakes to hit the truck. And I mean, I'm not a religious person, but like, it's just a miracle that I didn't crash with that truck because it was so close. So I was really, really shaken up by that. And I drove home safely, and I gave the baby to my husband, and I had tears streaming down my face and adrenaline running through my body. And I went and I called that doctor's office, and I said, I just fell asleep at the wheel. So I know that you said I didn't have risk factors for this, but I need to find somebody who knows about sleep and get tested for whatever it could be. So that's how I got my diagnosis. So there's a whole other story about how crazy my first polysomnogram was, like just really briefly, because you're all sleep tech, you might think it's funny. And so I never heard of a polysomnogram. I didn't know what that was. So they said, oh, we're going to send sleep techs to your house to wire you up for a full polysomnogram, and then a sleep tech in Texas is going to watch you sleep through a webcam on this laptop that we're going to put beside your bed, and that's where you're going to do your sleep test. So everyone I've told about that since has been like, what? They're like, I've never heard of that before. So that is what happened. And then I went to a sleep specialist, got a diagnosis, and he said, you're going to go on CPAP. I went to the DME company, and they said, you're going on CPAP. Here's your CPAP in a plastic bag. And I think it's fair to say I took home that CPAP and had every possible problem. So everything you've ever heard patients talk about, I had mask. Like it took me months to realize that they'd given me a large mask, and my face is not large. It's like a So I had really bad leaks. It just was not working for me. I didn't feel better. I just spent a lot of time on those, like, this is back in the day, this is like 2008, so I was like on forums and Facebook groups, all that kind of thing. So anyway, eventually I made peace with it, and I started using CPAP regularly. And then I had another child, and I was juggling part-time work and got really busy. But it always occurred to me, I didn't know anything in my life was sleep apnea. Like every so often somebody would say, oh, my great uncle has that, or my grandpa has that. But I didn't know anybody else who was using CPAP or had that diagnosis. So I always felt pretty isolated and just alone in my journey. So skip forward. So right before the pandemic, I went to a doctor's appointment, and I saw an article in the waiting room where it was talking about sleep apnea. And they were talking a lot about CPAP, but then right at the end it said, and there's some alternative therapies like oral appliance therapy and the Inspire implant and surgeries with ENTs and all different things. And I was like, well, I've been using CPAP for like 12 years at that point, and I've never heard anything about any of those things. And so it made me, I listened to a lot of podcasts, so I went to, try and find a podcast to learn more about that. And what I really was looking for was stories of other patients who were, using these different treatment options and a bit about their experience. And I just couldn't find it. And so I kind of just decided to create it because I couldn't find it. So during the pandemic, my kids were, did anyone have kids at home during the pandemic, like trying to homeschool? Nightmare. So I had both of my kids home for like 6 weeks that summer. And I was just looking for a project where I could say, like, I'm really busy and you need to like not disturb me. So I started the podcast in my closet for the acoustics, but also because there were like 2 doors between me and them. And so really a lot of the reason I started the podcast was for myself to build some community and meet other people with sleep apnea and just like explore all the treatment options. And the most important thing was shattering stereotypes about who has sleep apnea. And I think that there were so many images of older overweight men, and I love older overweight men, like, but like that was all I ever saw, and I knew that there were other people affected by this. So I kind of picked out some patient stories to share with you, and just to hopefully share, like I think you probably see a lot of people who go to their doctor, get a referral, come to the sleep lab, get their diagnosis, go on CPAP, and that works great for a lot of people. But so a lot of people that I've interviewed have been doing things slightly differently. So I thought it would be helpful just to share some of those different pathways, just so that you're aware of them. So one of my guests, Lita, so she started out with CPAP therapy, and just from the first moment, hated it. Had 4 children who were all really small and in and out of bed. And she also mentioned like she wore either a bonnet or a scarf at night, and it was tough to like really make the headgear work with her hair. And so she just really, it didn't work well for her, and she ended up looking for an alternative. And so what worked for her was she got an oral appliance. So we talked all about that in the episode. Craig Baker is, we kind of, I found him on Instagram, and he's a personal trainer from Sydney in Australia, and originally was from the UK and took part in like decathlon stuff, and he's like super fit. So he's also a sports model. So if you look at his Instagram, it's like him in a derelict warehouse, like ripping off his shirt and drinking a sports drink or whatever. So for Craig, he also went about 10 years to diagnosis because he went to a lot of different doctors with all of the symptoms of sleep apnea and was told, people like you don't have sleep apnea, you're too fit, you're too slim, you're not overweight, like we just don't, that can be right. So he actually came about his diagnosis because he went on a trip with some friends and they mentioned that he made really weird noises while he was asleep and videoed him. And so he took that video to his doctor, and that's how he got some treatment. But for him, his doctor sent it to an ENT. So he had huge tonsils, and once they had the tonsils removed and multiple nasal surgeries all at the same time, which I'm not sure that he would recommend anyone doing, and they tested him again. So they had done an initial test, and he had some apnea, and then once he'd done those surgeries, he no longer has some apnea. So then Micah is from Spain, and so she was very young when she first realized she had sleep apnea. So she had a sleep test, I believe at home, that showed that she had sleep apnea. And then she went straight to looking for an oral and maxillofacial surgeon to do double jaw surgery. So some people with sleep apnea are the kind of phenotype where their air, I know the double jaw surgery thing, everybody kind of goes, oh gosh. Yeah, so they do two different things. They start with, has anyone heard of SARPI? No. So surgically assisted rapid palate expansion. So essentially her palate, the roof of her mouth was too narrow. So the roof of your mouth is the floor of your nose. So if it's too narrow, there's not enough room for the air to pass, right? So she started off with surgically assisted rapid palate expansion, which made more room. And then once they did that, they cut both her jaws and moved it forward, and she has titanium plates. And so for her, it was extremely successful. I mean, I don't fancy it either, but like for her, she was a woman like in her 20s, and she thought it was worth doing this really big procedure to not have to. So after she'd done that, she tested again, didn't have anymore. And Tyrus, again, did not go the route of like going to a sleep study and all that. She went initially to a bariatric surgeon. So she had a lot of different health problems, and the doctor had told her a lot of it was because of her weight. So she started considering bariatric surgery and having a sleeve. And that surgeon won't do any operations on people that haven't had a sleep study. It's so common for people having bariatric surgery to have sleep apnea. So she said, I can't have sleep apnea because I don't snore, right? Which we know is not, you don't have to snore to have sleep apnea. So sure enough, she has sleep apnea when they did that test. So she was on CPAP for a very short time, it turned out, because it was probably 3 months from when she had the surgery, and she lost weight really rapidly. And for her sleep apnea then was so, her AHI was so low that they didn't have to continue CPAP. So I put this guy in here because I loved him. He's one of my favorite people I've interviewed. So Dr. Yan is from China. He's the only person that I've interviewed from China. And I feel as though he's just kind of like what we think of as our gold star people. If everybody could be as easy as him, it wouldn't be such a big deal, like trying to treat people. So he essentially had to diagnose himself because sleep apnea is not really a thing in China. So he is a surgeon, and he just read a lot of books and figured out he had all these symptoms. And he managed to somehow get a sleep test in China, and sure enough, has sleep apnea and started CPAP. So for him, and this is kind of what I wish for everybody, right? And it's just not every patient. He woke up the next morning after he CPAP, and he was just like, the colors are brighter. I feel like a different person. Like, you know, how have I been living under this fog, and now it's all better, right? So, and then for him, he uses CPAP like religiously every night, and then he just said he didn't even change anything much about his lifestyle. He kind of like started going to the gym a little bit more because he felt better, and he lost a bunch of weight, and like so his pressures got lowered on CPAP, and just life is really great with Dr. Yan. So that's all I really have to say about him. It's awesome. And then Karen, she had the opposite experience of CPAP, where she had really severe claustrophobia. So she just had a really tough time. She came to her sleep study through her psychiatrist. So she was having really intense depression. She struggled with cognitive problems. So one of the stories that she shared on the podcast when I interviewed her was her job was going around to Best Buy stores and demonstrating things like cameras. And so she was standing in front of a group of people, and she's done this like a million times. And she's standing in front of a group of people, and she's looking at the lens caps of the camera. And she's just kind of like, you take and she wants to say lens cap, but she cannot find the word for that at all. And that was one of the main reasons that she knew there was something really wrong, was the cognitive decline, right? So her psychiatrist was the one that said you really should get a sleep study because that could be because of sleep apnea. And sure enough, it turned out she did have sleep apnea. So when she started CPAP, she had this really terrible claustrophobia and tried all sorts of things. She actually went to a behavioral sleep medicine professional who tried to help her with acclimatizing to the mask, and it just wasn't enough to help her. So she ended up getting the Inspire implant. And she was actually the first person that I interviewed on my podcast. And for her, that's worked really well. I've also interviewed another person that got inspired and it didn't go so well, but yeah, there's a lot of ranges of different experiences. So Maggie's kind of similar to what we're talking about, the surgically assisted rapid palate extension. MSE is something offered by orthodontists. So it's a similar, it's a palate expansion method that involves implanting metal posts in the roof of your mouth and then using like an expander to pull those apart essentially. And they either do a surgical incision of your palate or they just wait till it cracks. Yeah. She explained it all on the podcast and I was just like, oh gosh. Yeah. So she's doing really well though, I think. So and I don't think she's gonna go on to do double jaw surgery. I think she's just happy to do what she's done already. And has anyone heard of Excite OSA? Few people, yeah. So this is fairly new and it's really for snoring and mild sleep apnea at the moment. So Brandon was a guy that I interviewed in Orlando and he had pretty mild in terms of AHI. His AHI was pretty mild. And so the problem was he was having a lot of sleepiness during the day and a lot of symptoms. So the doctor said, oh, I just heard about this new thing. They've given me a couple of units to try. Do you want to try out this new thing called XIOSA? And he was like, sure. So it's a daytime treatment. Does anyone know what a TENS machine is? Yeah. So sometimes when you go to the chiropractor, they'll put that TENS machine thing on your back and it like makes kind of funny, I don't really know exactly what it does. It does some neuromuscular electrical stimulation is what it does. So it's similar to that, but for your tongue muscles. So the idea is if you strengthen and tone your tongue, it's less likely to fall back and obstruct your airway. So he used this thing, and it kind of looks like this little white and flexible thing you put in your mouth, and it runs a cycle where it kind of like has electrical, like you don't do anything, you just watch TV, but it sends electrical pulses to tone and strengthen your tongue. So he did that for 6 weeks for 20 minutes a day, and it really improved his symptoms. So we carried on using. So I had one of the first people that I interviewed was a dentist who did oral appliance therapy. And her name's Dr. Natasha Hassan-Sarwar, and she's in Texas. So when I was interviewing her, she kind of said something as an offhand comment where she said, well, you know that nasal breathing is really important for people with sleep apnea. And I was like, no. And because I'm a total mouth breather, right? So I was like, no, what do you mean? And she said, well, you've read James Nestor's book, right? And I said, no. So I got this, has anyone read this? Breath by James Nestor? No? Okay. So essentially this book is all about how mouth breathing is really bad for you and nasal breathing is good for you, essentially. And especially when it comes to sleep apnea. So what he did in this book is him and a friend did a little experiment where they were trying to decide, like, does it make a difference whether you breathe through your mouth or your nose? Because I was always told, even by my sleep tech, like, do you breathe out your nose or your mouth? And I said my mouth. They were like, okay, you need a full face mask then. And nobody ever said to me, like, it's not good to breathe out your mouth, right? So they did this experiment at Stanford where him and a friend shoved some like kind of like maybe silicone stuff up their nose. Anyway, they blocked off their nose so they could only breathe through their mouth. And then they did 10 days where they did experiments where they were like running and like cycling and different things, and they tracked their sleep and all this. So essentially, these two really healthy, fit men gave themselves storing the sleep apnea purely by mouth breathing over 10 days. And then they did another 10 days where they took them high and showed that they basically got rid of their snoring sleep apnea again. So yeah, it's a really fascinating book, and so highly recommend it. I've also done like a little bit of a plug, but on my podcast I did interview James Master, so you can listen to it as well. So one of the quotes from his book is, "Mouth breathing, turns out, changes the physical body and transforms the airways, all for the worse." And so if there's only one thing that you take away from today, I would really, really encourage all of you to go to this website. It's Fairest, FAIREST.org. And what they have is the 6 red flags for pediatric sleep disorder breathing. So this was done by the Breathe Institute in California. And they're looking at signs you can see in kids that they might develop sleep disorder breathing soon or sleep apnea later in the future. And when I looked at all of these, I had all of this. I'm like the poster child, right? So I think sometimes we're really mystified, like, why do these people that aren't overweight, develop sleep apnea so early? And so some of this explains some of those people, right? So when I was a child, I had really bad allergies where I couldn't breathe through my nose. And I had huge tonsils. And I had a tongue tie so that my tongue couldn't rest over my mouth. And so if you think about where your tongue is resting right now, as you're sitting here, so you should be breathing entirely through your nose, and your tongue should be suctioned gently up to the roof of your mouth all the time. So that was not happening with me. In part, the reason why was that I had a tongue tie under my tongue that was pulling my tongue down so that it couldn't rest where it was supposed to rest. So yeah, we've already talked a lot about how I'm a mouth breather, so I think we've covered that. And then people often develop a high, narrow arch palate. So I think the main reason for this slide is just to say, with all of these things I've just been talking about, taking early action with young children is huge. So with small children, if they can breathe through their nose and they're just not doing it, they're just developing a habit of mouth breathing, it could be as easy as just reminding them to breathe through their nose, or have them go see what's called a myofunctional therapist. Has anyone heard of myofunctional therapy? Well, thanks to people in the back. So essentially, they're usually either dental hygienists or they're speech and language pathologists who have gone on to do extra training in myofunctional therapy. So essentially what they do is they will evaluate how you're breathing or how a child is breathing, and they'll look at exercises to strengthen the tongue and to encourage proper oral rest posture. That's really difficult to do as a woman in her 40s, like when you're trying to kind of undo all the stuff that's kind of already happened. So this is just some of the stuff. I did have my tongue tie released, and I did some myofunctional therapy, and I also did what's called the take-o breathing. So we're not going to super spend loads of time on that, but there's a lot of different podcast episodes on any of these things if you're interested. So does anyone feel that change is coming to sleep medicine? And there's a lot of changes to, the job of being a sleep tech or a respiratory therapist. I don't know whether I just see it or whether you feel that in your jobs. So some of the things that I see are things like AI assisting with sleep test scoring. Have you guys heard of that? I know Answer Days is here. How do you feel about that? Does it make you feel like there's going to be less of a job for you? Okay. So some people kind of worry about new technology, what impact that's going to have. So another thing that's happening is home testing technology, is getting much better. Or more reliable, I should say. I still think there's such a need for in-lab testing, right? So we'll come to that. And then the other thing is, I think a lot of patients never see the inside of the sleep lab because they're going a different pathway, right? They're exploring an option like with a dentist or with a surgeon. You know, they're not necessarily going to a sleep specialist first. So, but what I see is that we need more sleep techs, and I think that it's really your time to shine. So the statistic I see all the time is that 80% of people with obstructive sleep apnea are undiagnosed. So I feel like it just rolls off people's tongues, like, yeah, 80% of people are undiagnosed. But that's a horrifying statistic, right? And we have to work to change that because, you know, people are dying, right? Like, not to be melodramatic, but it really does rob people of the quality of their life. Ends up to, you know, ending their life sooner than it has to be. So what I would love to see is sleep techs having more of a one-on-one patient role where they can really help patients with CPAP problems. There's a ton of patients that need help with that. I think that they don't have a lot of one-on-one with professionals like you guys. And I think that there are plenty of patients to go around, right? It's just that 80% of them don't have a diagnosis. So I see a lot of ways that we can all work together to raise awareness, which would leave, like, there's still always going to be people that need to be in a sleep lab. Right? There's so many people that have more than one sleep disorder. And there's so many people that just have really challenging cases that are complicated, right? So I would just love to see sleep techs move to having more patients one-on-one and leave like the easy stuff to home testing. So I see, does anybody here have their own podcast or have a YouTube channel or honestly have their own like social media? Anyone? Okay, I've got my work cut out. So, what I would really love is to see a lot more sleep techs and respiratory therapists out there sharing really valuable information with the general public. So whether that's by doing something like the CCSH, like, have any of you heard of that? Like, there's a qualification you can do to help with patient education, or whether it's becoming like a YouTube celebrity. And so I'm not getting a lot of buy-in from these faces. I thought you guys would be like, pick me. And so I think that, like, you know, when I first got on social media and started doing my podcast, like, I'm just a patient, right? So if I can do it, really anyone can. And there's so much need for the information, right? There's so many people out there that have these symptoms that just don't know that snoring is not normal. They don't know that, like, if you're waking up after 8 or 9 hours sleep, you're still tired. There could be something wrong with your sleep. We're stuck on sleep hygiene tips, right? So there's so many people out there sharing. I mean, it's great to do good sleep hygiene, but if you don't feel better after 2 weeks, you're going to want to go see a doctor, right? Like, there's so many diagnosable sleep disorders that are just going missed just because of lack of awareness. And so I really think, like, there's a lot of opportunities in content creation, whether it's on social media or working in social media influencing, and create courses, digital products. There's so many opportunities that I really think you guys should get into. It's really good. So I think sometimes when you look at, like, what holds people back from using their voice and really putting themselves out there, I think a lot of people are, has anyone considered it and then just been like, I don't want to do that? A few people, there we go. Thank you. Oh my gosh. So I'll just speak directly to you. So what I hear a lot of people kind of say is, like, you know, like, I need to, like, lose 5 pounds and then I can be on videos, or you know, if I just get another credential, then I'll be, you know, better suited to be out there on social media. And also, people think you need this huge audience, right, to get brands to work with you to be an influencer, and you really don't, especially in this, like, area of sleep apnea and sleep disorders. There's so many companies that want, like, people out there just sharing their own, you know, sharing all that they know, which, you guys, that's a lot, right? And also, people think, like, I have to be the leading expert in my field, but you really don't, like, I'm patient, and I'm just, you know, sharing what I know, so. So I guess the last thing I just wanted to say is just like, we really need you all, right? Like, we need you out there helping to raise awareness, because that 80% number is not good enough. We can do better, but we all have to work together to get these messages out there. There's also a lot of people who have backgrounds in being sleep techs who are sleep coaching. So I don't know if that's anything that any of you consider, but there's a need for helping, holding people's hands and helping them through the sleep testing, you know, like navigating that whole thing. And also, I can't say enough, like how many people I talk to who need help with their PAP therapy. So people who actually know about that, that's a really valuable resource that you guys can be sharing on a bigger stage. So that was like the main, but if there's any questions, I'd love to have a bit of a discussion.
So when you get asked those questions about you or anything,
About feedback or
anything, your podcast,
oh my gosh. I mean, so much. I feel like a lot of people, so there's a lot of people stuck in, I don't want to do CPAP, so I'm not going to get tested because I don't want to do CPAP, right? So I think part of it is communicating to people that there are other options. Now, CPAP might be the best option for that person, right? But to me, you need to get them to get a diagnosis so that they can find out, do I have mild, moderate, or severe sleep apnea? What's the best treatment option for me? And sometimes, like, there's people I've interviewed who, you know, have severe sleep apnea where they get partway through their test, and the sleep tech will run in and put a mask on them. And they wake up and they feel so much better that even though they've been so resistant to CPAP, then they're like, oh, I actually need to do this, so I feel so much better. So I think sometimes it's like getting over these ideas people have in their head about, like, you know, well, denial, frankly, and just like, you know, that's not me, or I don't want it to be that thing. Was there anyone else?
Thank you, Ellen. Great job. It's just a couple minutes. Our next speaker was not able to travel, or not able to travel and be with us, so she's going to be virtual for the next presentation. She presented last year. She's very engaging, so she's going to be on video screen. So give us just a few minutes to get her started. We'll reconvene.
Hey, Sarah, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Let's see. If you want to go on and share your screen. We don't want to do that.
Hey, Sarah, say something for us so we see how loud you are.
We need
There.
to.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great.
Hold on 1 second.
And
So on Zoom, I'm but for your
oh, in here. So we'll do this. Get rid of her. Get rid of that. This, we're going to go back to, this needs to be full screen. Screen share. Get to window. Wait a minute, how do we get, I wonder if we can get her video up too. There you go. What's that? See if you can you do the same thing over here? Oh, there you go. Let me make her.
Good.
Yeah.